Emma stared at her phone. 7 missed calls from her sister. 3 voicemails she hadn't listened to. A text notification lit up the screen. "Why don't you ever just call me back?" She felt the familiar knot in her chest. Not because she didn't care, but because the thought of picking up the phone and talking felt like being asked to perform surgery without preparation. Instead, she opened her notes app and began typing. Paragraph after paragraph. Deleting, rewriting, crafting the exact words that matched what she actually felt. 40 minutes later, she had a 3-paragraph text that said more than an hour-long phone call ever could. Her sister replied in seconds. "You wrote me an essay, lol, just call me?" Emma closed her phone and felt misunderstood. Again, here's what nobody tells you. People who prefer writing over talking aren't avoiding connection. They're seeking a different kind of depth that spoken words can never reach. And once you understand why their brains work this way, you'll see that what looks like distance is actually the opposite. Across town, Marcus sat in a conference room during a team meeting. His manager asked, "Marcus, what do you think about the new strategy?" Everyone turned to look at him. His mind went blank, not because he didn't have thoughts. He had 17 different angles, 3 concerns, and 2 potential solutions. But they were all tangled in his head, competing for priority, lacking the structure they needed to become speech. "Nah, I think it could work. I need to think about it more." His manager's face showed mild disappointment. After the meeting, Marcus went back to his desk and wrote a 2-page analysis covering everything he couldn't say in that room. He emailed it an hour later. His manager never acknowledged it. This is the silent conflict that people who prefer writing live with every single day. They have depth that doesn't translate to speed. They have clarity that requires time. They have truth that needs precision. And the world rewards people who can think out loud. But what if the world has it backwards? Emma was 32 when she finally understood what was different about her. She wasn't broken. She wasn't antisocial. She wasn't even necessarily introverted in the traditional sense. She was what psychologists call a high reflective processor. Her brain didn't produce thoughts in neat linear sentences ready for speech. Her thoughts came in layers, associations, nuances that needed external structure to become clear. Writing gave her that structure. The blank page was a place where thoughts could be seen, rearranged, refined. Speech was a performance with no rehearsal. Writing was thinking made visible. For years she thought something was wrong with her. Why couldn't she just be spontaneous like everyone else? Why did she need time to process before responding? Why did phone calls feel like ambushes and texting feel like breathing? Then she met Dr. Anaya Reeves, a cognitive psychologist who studied communication preferences and personality architecture. Dr. Reeves didn't have an office that looked like a therapist's office. It looked like a writer's studio. Shelves of journals, a typewriter in the corner, notebooks stacked on every surface. Emma had come for an evaluation, expecting diagnoses and clinical terms. Dr. Reeves began with a question. When someone asks you how you're doing, what happens in your mind? Emma paused. I don't know how to answer that quickly, because how I'm doing isn't one thing, it's like 12 things at once, and if I say I'm fine, it feels like a lie. But if I try to explain all 12 things out loud, I sound insane. Dr. Reeves nodded, and when you write it, when the first write it, I can separate the 12 things. I can see which ones matter. I can find the through line. I can say what's actually true instead of what's easiest. That, Dr. Reeves said, is not a disorder. That's a different operating system. She explained that human beings process information through different cognitive channels. Some people have what's called high verbal fluency. Their thoughts convert to speech rapidly with minimal internal editing. They think out loud. They process by talking. Silence for them is uncomfortable because it means the processing has stopped. But others have high reflective depth. Their thoughts don't arrive pre-packaged for speech. They arrive as raw material that requires internal organization before it can be externalized. For them, speech without reflection feels false. Talking before they're ready feels like showing someone a half-built house and asking them to live in it. Writing creates the space reflection needs. The pause between thought and expression isn't hesitation, it's craftsmanship. Emma felt something shift. So the first I'm not just slow. You're not slow, you're thorough. And the world mistakes thoroughness for inability. Dr. Reeves pulled out a notebook. Let me show you something. She drew 2 diagrams. The first diagram showed a straight line from thought to speech. This is how high verbal fluency people process. Thought becomes word almost instantly, fast, efficient, socially rewarded. The second diagram showed a thought entering a web of associations, being filtered, structured, and refined before emerging as written or carefully spoken words. This is you. Thought becomes meaning. Meaning becomes structure. Structure becomes language. Slower, deeper, often misunderstood. Neither is better, Dr. Reeves said, but the world is built for the first group, which means the second group spends their whole lives feeling like they're failing at something they were never designed to do. Emma stared at the diagrams. I spent 32 years thinking I needed to get better at talking. And what if the goal wasn't to get better at talking, but to honor how you actually process connection? That question changed everything. Dr. Reeves explained that people who prefer writing over talking often share several psychological traits that cluster together in predictable ways. It's not just about introversion or shyness. It's about the architecture of how their minds construct meaning. First, they tend to have high internal complexity. When you ask them a simple question, there's no simple answer because their minds immediately see 5 dimensions of that question. They're aware of context, subtext, contradiction, and nuance. Spoken conversation demands simplification. Writing allows complexity to remain intact. Second, they have strong editorial instincts. They don't just think thoughts, they evaluate thoughts. They ask, is this accurate? Is this fair? Is this what I actually mean? In real-time conversation, there's no time for that evaluation. Words come out before they're vetted. For someone with strong editorial instincts, that feels reckless. Writing gives them the control they need to say things responsibly. Third, they experience emotional clarity through articulation. Many people know how they feel and then describe it. But for reflective processors, the act of writing is how they discover what they feel. The feeling exists as a fog until language shapes it. Speech is too fast for that discovery process. Writing is where emotions become knowable. Dr. Reeves watched Emma take notes. You're writing down what I'm saying. I always do. I don't really understand things until I write them. Exactly. For you, writing isn't just communication. It's cognition. It's how you think. Over the next several sessions, Dr. Reeves helped Emma understand the specific patterns that defined her psychology. She wasn't avoiding people. She was protecting the integrity of her thoughts. She wasn't being difficult. She was being precise. And precision takes time. But the world doesn't give time. The world gives 30 seconds in a meeting. A phone call that demands instant response. A text that expects immediate reply. And when you can't perform at that speed, the world decides you're awkward, aloof, or uninterested. Dr. Reeves introduced Emma to a framework she called the 3 layers of written processors. Not everyone who prefers writing is the same. There are patterns within the pattern. Layer 1, the clarity seekers. These are people who write because they need to see their thoughts externalized to understand them. Their minds work spatially. Speech is linear and disappears as soon as it's spoken. Writing stays. It can be seen, rearranged, and refined. For clarity seekers, conversation often feels like trying to build a puzzle in the dark. Writing turns the lights on. Layer 2, the emotional translators. These are people who experience emotions intensely, but in ways that don't translate easily to words. They feel something huge and complex, but when asked what's wrong, they freeze. Not because they don't know, but because what they feel doesn't fit into the small boxes conversation provides. Writing gives them unlimited space. They can describe the texture of the feeling, the history of it, the contradictions within it. Speech flattens, writing preserves. Layer 3, the truth protectors. These are people who have a visceral need to say things accurately. If they're going to speak, it has to be true. Not just factually true, but emotionally true, contextually true, fairly true. In real-time conversation, there's pressure to fill silence, to smooth over tension, to say what's expected. For truth protectors, that pressure feels like betrayal. Writing removes the pressure. They can take as long as they need to find the words that match reality. Emma recognized herself in all three layers. She needed to see her thoughts. She needed space for emotional complexity. And she needed to protect truth from the distortions of speed. So what do I do? Emma asked. The world still expects me to talk. Dr. Reeves leaned forward. You stop trying to become someone else. And you start designing a life that matches how you actually work. That sounded idealistic. Emma had a job that required meetings. She had relationships that required phone calls. She couldn't just opt out of spoken communication. I'm not saying opt out, Dr. Reeves said. I'm saying stop apologizing. Stop treating your preference for writing as a deficiency, and start using it strategically. She explained that most people who prefer writing spend their energy trying to compensate. They force themselves into phone calls. They practice small talk. They try to be spontaneous. And it exhausts them because they're working against their wiring. The alternative is to own the wiring and build systems around it. When someone asks you a question you're not ready to answer, what if you said, "That's a great question. Let me think about it and send you my thoughts"? Emma blinked. People would think that's weird. Some would, but the ones who matter would respect it. And more importantly, you'd give yourself the space to respond with depth instead of panic. Dr. Reeves pulled out another notebook. Let's build your communication design. Over the next hour, they created a map. Situations where Emma could use writing instead of speech. Ways to set expectations with people in her life. Scripts for declining phone calls without guilt. Boundaries that honored her processing speed. It wasn't about avoiding all conversation. It was about choosing where to spend her verbal energy and protecting her written space as sacred. Writing isn't your backup plan, Dr. Reeves said. It's your primary language. Treat it that way. Emma started applying the framework. When her sister called, she didn't force herself to answer. She sent a text. I saw you called. I want to give you a real response, not a distracted one. I'll write you tonight. Her sister was annoyed at first. But when Emma sent a thoughtful 3-paragraph message that night, her sister replied, "Okay, I actually prefer this. I can read it twice and think about it." At work, Marcus, who sat 2 desks over, noticed Emma's shift. He'd always been the same way. Quiet in meetings, detailed in emails, overlooked it. One day after a team meeting where he'd frozen again, Emma walked over to his desk. You know you're not bad at communicating, right? You're just using the wrong format. Marcus looked up, surprised. You sent that analysis last week, Emma said. It was better than anything anyone said out loud in that meeting. But nobody acknowledged it because they've already decided you're not a contributor. Marcus felt seen and frustrated. So what do I do? Rewrite my brain? No. You make them see your brain on your terms. Emma told him about Dr. Reeves, about the 3 layers, about the difference between verbal fluency and reflective depth, about how the world mistakes one operating system for the only operating system. Marcus started working with Dr. Reeves too. He learned that his freezing in meetings wasn't anxiety. It was cognitive overload. His brain was running 17 processes while everyone else's was running 2. By the time he sorted through the complexity, the conversation had moved on. Dr. Reeves taught him something that changed his career. Your value isn't in real-time response. It's in considered analysis. Stop trying to compete in the arena you'll always lose. Dominate the arena you're built for. Marcus started sending pre-meeting memos. Detailed, structured, comprehensive. At first, people ignored them. Then his manager started referencing them in meetings. Then, other teams started requesting them. Within 6 months, Marcus became the person everyone waited to hear from. Not in the meeting, but after. His written analyses became more influential than any spoken opinion in the room. The framework wasn't about avoiding speech. It was about relocating value. But then came the test neither Emma nor Marcus was prepared for. A moment that forced them to confront the limitations of writing and the necessity of spoken words. Emma's father had a heart attack. She got the call from her mother, and for the first time in years, she picked up the phone without hesitation. Her mother was crying, confused, asking questions Emma couldn't answer. And in that moment, Emma realized something crucial. Writing is powerful for depth, but speech is necessary for presence. She couldn't text her mother comfort. She couldn't email reassurance. She had to be there, in real time, with imperfect words and incomplete thoughts. And it was hard. Her brain wanted to process, to structure, to refine. But her mother needed her now. Emma stayed on the phone for 2 hours. She said things that weren't perfectly articulated. She stumbled. She repeated herself. She didn't have time to edit. And it was enough. When she hung up, she felt something unexpected. Not exhaustion from performing outside her comfort zone, but gratitude that she could. She called Dr. Reeves the next day. "I think I've been using writing to avoid something." Dr. Reeves listened. "I've been treating writing like it's superior, like people who talk are just less thoughtful. But my mom didn't need a thoughtful essay. She needed to hear my voice. And the first almost couldn't give her that because I've made speech into the enemy." Dr. Reeves paused before responding. "You've just discovered the advanced level." She explained that people who prefer writing often fall into one of two traps. The first trap is self-hatred. They see their preference as a flaw and spend their lives trying to fix it. The second trap is superiority. They decide that writing is the higher form and that people who speak easily are shallow. Both traps are wrong. The goal isn't to choose writing over talking or talking over writing. The goal is to know which tool serves the moment. Writing when depth matters, speech when presence matters, and wisdom to tell the difference. Emma felt the framework complete itself. She wasn't broken for preferring writing, but she also wasn't exempt from the messy, imperfect, real-time connection that speech provides. Over the next year, Emma's relationship with communication transformed. She stopped forcing herself into phone calls that drained her, but she also stopped hiding behind texts when presence was required. She learned to say, "I need time to think about this," without shame. And she learned to stay in conversation even when her thoughts weren't perfectly formed. Her sister stopped complaining about the texts. She started saving them. "You say things in writing that I need to come back to," she told Emma. "When we talk, I forget half of it. But when you write, I can keep it." Marcus built a career around his written analyses, but he also started practicing something Dr. Reeves called scaffolded speech. Before meetings, he wrote out his key points, not to read them aloud, but to give his brain the structure it needed. When he spoke, he wasn't improvising from chaos. He was speaking from a foundation he'd already built in writing. People started describing him as thoughtful instead of quiet. The perception shifted because he stopped apologizing for needing time. 5 years later, Emma became a consultant helping teams communicate across different processing styles. She taught managers to stop assuming that the person who talks first is the person with the best ideas. She taught teams to create space for written input, not as an afterthought, but as a primary channel. One day, a young woman approached her after a workshop. "I've always thought something was wrong with me because I can't think fast enough in conversations." Emma smiled. She pulled out a notebook and wrote something down, then handed it to the woman. It said, "You don't think too slowly. You think too deeply for speed. And that's not a flaw, it's a design." The woman read it twice. Her eyes filled with tears. "Can the first keep this? That's why I wrote it down. Now let me ask you something. You've made it this far into this video. That means something about this resonates with you. Maybe you're someone who writes paragraphs when others send sentences. Maybe you're someone who needs 3 days to reply because you're finding the right words. Maybe you're someone who's been told your whole life to just say what you mean when what you mean takes time to become clear. Here's what I want you to understand. Your preference for writing over talking isn't a communication problem. It's a cognitive style, and the world needs people who think the way you think. The people who talk easily are not better at communication. They're better at a specific type of communication that our culture rewards. But depth, precision, and emotional accuracy require time. They require the space that writing provides. You're not failing at conversation. You're succeeding at something most people never attempt: saying things that are actually true. So here's my challenge to you. Stop apologizing for needing time. Stop forcing yourself into communication formats that don't match how your brain works. And start building a life where your written words are valued as much as anyone's spoken ones. Write the email instead of making the call. Send the text instead of feeling guilty for not picking up. Take 3 days to respond if that's what truth requires. The people who matter will wait. The people who don't will leave. And that's not a loss. That's a filter. Tell me in the comments, are you someone who prefers writing over talking? And what's one boundary you're going to set to protect your processing time? Because when you stop treating your cognitive style as a deficiency and start treating it as a design, everything changes. You're not too slow. You're precisely the speed that meaning requires.